Conquering the crave. You guys all look so healthy, and you probably eat healthy and live healthy, and I'm super glad for that. But I will tell you what motivated me to study this for myself, and then I developed it to this talk for you. And that is because I do work with a lot of different people in both of my jobs. But in the job that I do with Lifestyle Medicine Group, I get to do nutrition counseling with a lot of people just with different various diagnoses and that sort of thing. And I do weight loss classes, and I run into what I'm going to call the crave on a daily basis in other people. Now, I've also dealt with the crave in me in a very strong, powerful way, and I wanted to be able to help my patients more than just, this is what you should be eating. You know, when we think about a dietitian, we always think, meal plans and that sort of thing, and that's actually one of my weak points, because I think that really inherently, if we were trying to get down more to the root of the problem, that's what I'm wanting to talk about during my weekend with you guys, and I'm calling it the crave. So we're going to be expanding on this topic for all 4 of my meetings, and by the end, the faith is the victory is going to hopefully mean something even more powerfully and practically to you in this area of our life. Because I believe really that the most powerful, most effective way for us to overcome the crave is by faith. And we will get to that. But first, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, and I'm hoping my slides turn out on that screen for you guys well enough. So I'm going to be asking the different questions of why, where, how, when. Those are going to be my questions in regards to the crave, and we'll be answering them through each of these sessions. But why do we have to launch warfare against the crave? Why not whatever we want to do? Why not eat whatever we want? Why not live the way whatever we want? Why not just enjoy life and experience, whatever we want? Why not? There's this one man, and I wouldn't tell you his name because he uses a lot of expletives in his explanations, but he's been in all Navy SEALs, like all the top, the careers of the Army and the Air Force, and anyway, he's done them all, and he's probably the most in shape, fit man on the planet, and he really believes that if it's something that you don't want to do, that's exactly what you need to do, because he's really into what he calls mental grit. And it kind of inspires me. I actually like some of his philosophy because I think we lack a lot of mental grit. But why engage in a warfare against the crave? And the Bible says there's a way that seems right to the man, but the end is what? It's death. We've got to realize that doing whatever we want is probably the best path to self-destruction on whatever level. And we're not just talking about, I died of a heart attack or, died from complications of some disease. It's literally killing us to be living in the however I want mode. So one of the first things I really try to encourage my patients with, especially if we're doing a weight loss class, is I tell them they have to have a powerful why. Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to live healthy? Why do you want to conquer the crave? So I have 4 items here that I want to just touch on. And the first is kind of obvious. Why would you want to conquer the crave? I want to be healthy. And I'm telling you, there is nothing like living in a healthy body. There's nothing like feeling comfortable in your own skin and feeling like, I'm thriving, right? That's such an amazing experience. But what does health mean to you? What is your definition of health? The World Health Organization defines health as 100% functioning and healing. 100%, right? So whatever it is in your body, I'm operating optimally, 100%, functioning at my highest capacity. That is what health is. Now, if I was to ask you guys how many of you here feel like you're healthy, that'd be kind of interesting to see, what your self-perception was of health. There's another definition: complete physical, mental, social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. I like that one too. That's a good definition. And as you see, I'm going to be pulling out a lot of different definitions of health because I think that it's such a all-encompassing word. But I find it very interesting that we call the way we kind of take care of the sick in this country, we call it health care, right? We're caring for your health. But tell me, if you go to the hospital or your doctor or your physical therapist or your dietitian or your nurse and you say, I'm healthy, but I just want to optimize it a little bit more, right? All my labs are perfect, my cholesterol's fine, my blood pressure's fine, and you go to your doctor, and what's he going to do? I don't have anything for you, go home, that's great, right? Maybe if he's a little lifestyle, oriented, he might say, keep, eating, keep exercising, keep doing what you're doing, that sort of thing. But are we really caring for people's health, or is it more like sick care? If you're sick, right, then we'll write the prescription, then we'll give you the treatment, and we'll give you the protocol, and we have a therapy for you, and your insurance will cover it. Insurance really doesn't honor necessarily health care. We see maybe some insurance is more getting into being willing to pay for like prevention and that sort of thing, but really it's sick care that we've got going on, it seems like, in this country. And interestingly enough, Johns Hopkins University rated the top 37 industrialized nations in terms of health, and guess where America came in? Dead last. Isn't that something? In overall health care. And yet we're spending the most with $2.6 trillion in 2022. So we care more if you're sick, if your labs are abnormal, and so forth. While spending more money than any other nation, if your labs are normal range, you're not sick, nothing is wrong with you, so go home. And that's really frustrating for people who kind of can tell, no, I'm not functioning optimally. I can tell something's wrong. I'm not, maybe I'm gaining weight and I don't see, obvious reasons for that, or I can feel low energy, or those types of things. And the doctor, again, might look at you and say, I don't really have anything for you. So that can be frustrating. 70% of Americans are on prescription medications. This has become our path to pursuing health, sadly. And yet, would you agree with me that maybe it's subpar? Maybe this is addressing people's symptoms, but is it truly helping people optimize? Not necessarily. So the British Medical Journal stated, this is back in 1991, and I haven't found a more recent figure of this, but I still thought this is in our lifetime, that only 15% of medical interventions were supported at that time by solid scientific evidence. Don't know exactly what they meant by their solid scientific evidence, because usually in order for something to be used in the healthcare arena, right, there has to be some research behind it, but maybe not thorough enough to qualify for this. But isn't that astounding? Like, we tend to think, if I want to be healthy, if I'm sick, something's ailing me, then I'm going to go to those who are some of the most educated people on the planet to obtain help. But not necessarily all the protocols and all the prescriptions that we have are a guarantee. So don't think of, this is the secret to my health. I guess that's what I'm trying to encourage you guys, right? There's not like a pill or potion that's going to equate to health. So how are we doing with health? 7 out of 10 Americans die of chronic disease. 5 out of 6 Americans get heart disease or cancer. That's pretty astounding, isn't it? About 1 in 10 have diabetes. 37.3 million Americans, about 1 in 5 people have diabetes and they don't know it. And probably what's even worse, more than 1 in 3 have pre-diabetes. That's 96 million American adults. And 87% of people with pre-diabetes don't know they have pre-diabetes. So a lot of times we think we're healthier than we are, right? We are like, I don't have any signs or symptoms. We go to the doctor, they tell me I have type 2 diabetes. What? Where did that come from? All of a sudden, something just occurred, it seems like, and yet it hasn't just occurred. It's been developing over this long period of time. Many of our body, in its attempt to fight for us, really protects you for years, sometimes decades, and yet, when we get this diagnosis, finally, we think something's wrong, but it's been developing over a long period of time. For adults with diagnosed diabetes, 69% had high blood pressure, 44% had high cholesterol, 39% had chronic kidney disease, and 12% reported having vision impairment or blindness. Diabetes with the highest among Black and Hispanic Latino adults in both men and women. So again, like I said, it's been developing usually over a long period of time. By the time someone's diagnosed with kidney disease, they only have 60% of their kidney function, right? Usually that's the case. And when someone is diagnosed or has a heart attack or a stroke, they have found atherosclerosis in autopsies of young soldiers, like in their 20s type of thing. So this has been going on for quite a long period of time. And this slide we're going to understand a lot better tomorrow. This will probably be our last session together. We kind of delve into understanding what this slide is really saying. But what I want you to see for right now is that zero line, that zero vertical line. That is when you're diagnosed with diabetes. That's when an individual is diagnosed with diabetes. Now I want you to see to the left of that line, the blue line is marking something called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is what we're going to learn about, and that is a driving mechanism that results in a manifestation of type 2 diabetes. But as you can see, insulin resistance increased potentially, at least in this person. It can be different for different people, but it can increase up to 20 years prior to a diagnosis. But we don't know it. Look at the yellow line. The yellow line is a person's fasting blood sugar. So you go to the doctor, maybe you get your annual exam and they test your fasting blood sugar and you're like, you're good, no diabetes, you're clear, see you next year. So look at the fasting blood sugar, all those years that this individual has been developing insulin resistance. That's only what I want you to look at right now. It's just those two lines, the yellow and the blue. Is it pretty obvious? So the blue line's been increasing, but the yellow line has been staying stable for years and years and years. And then just before the diabetes diagnosis, we've got some pre-diabetes going on, and then we hit the 126 number for a fasting blood sugar, and then they will diagnose you as having type 2 diabetes. But does that mean that the disease began at that moment? No. It's been all this time. So again, when we think about health, it's good to just understand, am I functioning optimally? Am I functioning? And then when we think of it maybe more along those terms, it becomes a journey and a quest and a way of life versus something that gets corrected and I become healthy, after a certain protocol or therapy. There is someone who is obsessed with your health, and that is God. And it is in love and pity to the race that he causes the light to shine upon health reform. What do you think of when you think of health reform? I was 19 years old when I was first introduced to health reform, and it became solely about changing what I ate, right? And it was a certain protocol. This was health reform. These are the foods that fit within health reform. And deviating from that is not health reform. That was kind of my initial introduction to health reform. But I was like super into it, right? Gonna do it, the stricter the better. I don't believe that necessarily anymore, just because I think my definition of health has changed. But what if we pursued health? What if our pursuit of health was reformed? What if Adventist health and the way we did medical care reformed? How we pursued health for myself and for other people? That would be powerful, and I think it must have originally encompassed that, what she meant by health reform. But God publishes his law and its penalties in order that all may learn what is for their highest good. So optimization, right? Optimal. Can we hit the zenith of who God designed you and I to be? What if that was something that we longed for and wanted to enter into? I think that would be really powerful. All right, so that was the first reason. Why? Health, right? Something that I want so much to experience to live my best life. And then the next one, what's your why? Happiness. And interestingly, that's a big one for people. Why do you eat what you eat? Well, it makes me happy, right? I was a kid when I was first introduced to the Happy Meal. My mom was a vegetarian. My dad would take us to McDonald's. And so we got Happy Meals. And whatever genius came up with that combination of Happy Meal, right? That sold billions. He is a billionaire for sure, and he made billions for McDonald's because who doesn't want a happy meal? I had a happy meal for breakfast. I was very happy eating this meal, very happy eating last night's meal too. But what is your definition of a happy meal? There's definitely a part of us that likes to eat for pleasure. And obviously this man is enjoying his pleasurable meal very, very much. The question is, are pleasure and happiness the same thing? Is there pleasure in happiness? Yeah, I think there's pleasure in happiness, but I don't think you can equate them, right? If you're pursuing pleasure, and we can just see this by looking at the top dogs of this world in terms of, who's the bigwigs, who's got the money, who's making it big. They're pursuing pleasure, but are they happy? No. They're always trying to find some pill, potion, drug, event to try to achieve that happiness. So we can't equate them. So let's make sure that we understand that when we think about happiness as being a motivator for health. I've had people come when I used to work in a clinic that would sit in my office and they just look at me straight in the face and they just say, look, I'm not here because I want to be here. I don't want to change the way I eat. I love the way I eat. It makes me happy. I'd rather die early than, do what you're going to tell me to do. I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. This is what but I kind of like it when people are upfront with me like that. I'm like, that's cool. I can deal with honesty, So I'd rather die happy than die skinny. Anyone heard of those kind of concepts before? So again, I want you to be happy. You want to be happy? I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. As a healthcare provider, I don't want you not to be happy. I don't want you to hate the way you eat and live and that kind of thing. So I don't want you to think I'm in conflict with that desire that you have. But the question becomes, are you really happier eating the way you're eating? Is that really achieving your end goal? And I think this graph is kind of fascinating. And if you look at the drug graph, it's very similar. And this is just trying to very simplistically examine what happens to us neurologically when we tap into some of these more accentuated forms of pleasure-inducing substances, right? Whether that's food or drugs or whatever it is. So we have this normal pleasure zone, and we might be going through our normal pleasure zone if we're mentally healthy. And that's a topic I think that is definitely worth addressing as well. If we're mentally healthy, then it's natural for us to have ebb and flows within our pleasure zone, right? Some things are just more pleasurable than others, and other things we do because we pull in the grit and we do it anyway. But then there's a certain satisfaction for doing that. So we learn how to find pleasure through life in the mundane and the normal, etc. And that's cool. But then someone gave you Doritos, or someone gave you, an Oreo cookie, or someone gave you cocaine, and whoop, all of a sudden my pleasure hit a new normal, a new high. And I experienced it and my brain registered it. Not only was I like, that felt really, really good, but my brain remembered that. And so the next time I might have a lull, what's my brain gonna remind you of to pick you back up? Do you remember that Dorito or that Oreo or that cocaine? Yeah, I do. And so we go back for more to try to bring back that enhanced pleasure zone. So we experience that enhanced pleasure, but have you ever heard like people who smoke a cigarette, they get an initial hit from dopamine, and maybe, the first few weeks, but then it lowers a little bit. So I gotta smoke a little bit more, right? In order to get that same kind of experience. And it might be the same thing with Oreos, and it might be the same thing with potato chips, and it might be the same thing with whatever it is that we're partaking of, that we're craving, okay? This is kind of promotes more of the crave. And so then it's kind of interesting. Neuroadaptation to junk foods. Our brains neuroadapt, and how I like to look at it is, let's say you took whatever it was that created that enhanced pleasure, and so all this dopamine, which is one of our pleasure-enhancing neurotransmitters, hormones in our brain, it's way up there. But it's the cells in my brain are like, that's so loud. That's so loud. And so it starts putting mufflers on the cells so that it doesn't hear it that loud, right? And so it neuroadapts. The cells literally change by closing down these receptors for dopamine. And what the individual's doing while they're experiencing pleasure, their brain is actually shutting down to pleasure. It's actually reducing its ability to experience pleasure. That's what's going on. That's the neuroadaptation. Isn't it amazing? Satan's lies that he's telling us, right? You're experiencing pleasure, but in reality, you're destroying your ability to experience pleasure. You see how it goes? So then there's this neuroadaptation. And now, while I'm doing these enhancing things, I'm not experiencing the level of pleasure that I once did. It's been dumbed down. Then if someone's like, man, you really should not be eating that or doing that, and so you try to abstain from it for a while, crash. I feel horrible. I'm down. I don't feel, I'm constantly wanting, constantly craving because this isn't how I was supposed to live, right? I'm miserable. So we have this we have this low phase, and even if someone's like, oh man, you gotta eat healthy, you need to eat this way, and they start eating that way, but their body doesn't respond well to it, their brain doesn't respond well to it, it takes time. Again, it takes more neuroadaptation, but eventually if they stick with it, then there's hope that they're gonna return to that normal pleasure zone. Interesting graph. This was a great study that was done with rats and monkeys. And they put electrodes on the brain of these animals where it would stimulate the pleasure-reward pathway. So there's a part in our brain that we've analyzed. This is where we have these glands and parts of the brain that are responsible for this experience of pleasure. And when they're lit up, we're lit up. So they put these electrodes where they're going to light up this part of the brain. Electrodes were placed in this pleasure response pathway of rats and monkeys. The animals were allowed to stimulate their own pleasure reward pathway by pressing a bar. Okay? Sometimes we do it through when we interact with each other. I get that hit. When I eat Debbie's cheesecake, I got that hit. When when the Doritos, it doesn't matter. There's so many things in life where we experience it. That was super pleasurable. Now, all these things guys have to do is press a bar. That's all you have to do is press that bar to experience that pleasure. So, bar pressing soon occupied most of the animals' time. Many animals were seen to forego food and water in preference to auto-stimulation. And I think that's a really important word. There are many ways in which we auto-stimulate, self-stimulation, trying to, initiate that pleasure response in our brains. The auto-stimulation in many instances continued to exhaustion. Some monkeys were clocked at 17,000 bar presses per hour. Pleasure, 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 pleasure. Are they happy? No. Talk about miserable. All of a sudden, these animals became enslaved, to this bar pressing. And this is us if we're willing to look at ourselves in the mirror. Some rats died foregoing food and water, just exhausted trying to press the bar. Happiness. Depression has actually been linked to processed food. Researchers split 3,500 participants, all middle-aged civil servants, into two diet groups. One that focused on whole foods, including plenty of fruits and vegetables, and one that ate lots of processed foods, such as sweetened desserts, fried foods, processed meats, refined grains, high-fat dairy products. Within 5 years, participants in the processed foods group had a 58% greater risk of depression than those who ate more whole foods. You want happiness? I want you to have happiness too. Let's really pursue how we can experience optimal happiness, because your brain is a physiological organ and it's going to respond to the rest of how you treat it physiologically. Diet and depression. 292 Geico employees who were either overweight or had previously been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes were divided into two groups: control group, a vegan dietary intervention group. And the vegan group experienced reduced feelings of depression, anxiety, and fatigue, and a boost in overall productivity and well-being. Isn't that amazing? James, would you mind letting me know what time it is? I have no idea.
10:06.
Pardon me?
10:06.
Okay, a randomized controlled trial of dietary improvement, the adults with major depression. This was a SMILES trial. And again, these people are just trying to understand, what is really making us happy. This is just medical research. And although there are many different versions of a healthful diet, And I totally agree with this, right? There are different versions of a healthful diet in different countries and cultures. And I actually agree that many of us would do well. We're not eating fish so much because of the contamination, right? The toxins in them from the environment. Sadly, fish are some of the most vulnerable to those toxins. They concentrate them in their fat. And so then when we eat the fat or take fish oil, we are potentially taking on what's tagged on, the toxins that are stored there. And so I do think that it's important for us to supplement with omega-3 fats or obtain them through the foods that we're eating, because they are very important for our brain and for brain health and depression. One of the ways in which we see this association between brain functioning and happiness, depression, and physical health is through this brain-gut connection. They call the gut the second brain, and I'm so into this concept. This, in a 2019 study that was published in Nature Microbiology, researchers observed that gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters, such as dopamine and serotonin. I thought those were only produced in my brain. Dopamine, remember, dopamine, while it's our pleasure hormone, it has a lot of different occupations and roles and things that it does for us. Serotonin we think of as our happy hormone in our brain that we try to increase its availability with medications that are given for depression. So anyway, here we have these same neurotransmitters being produced down here. In fact, 90% of our serotonin produced in our gut. So these that are connected to the brain via the vagus nerve, immune system, and other pathways, potentially influencing mood and behavior. They also noticed that depressed subjects tend to be lacking in two specific species of gut bacteria, so much so that they saw that within these thousands, this was a Finnish study, and they were like looking at 6,000 people, and of those 6,000 people, there were 180 that developed depression, and those 180 all had elevated levels of this one group of bacteria. So they were seeing these direct associations between, what was going on with the gut and then its manifestation in terms of mental health. And something I just want to throw out there, the dopamine and the serotonin, we don't know that they really bypass the blood-brain barrier, but that doesn't mean they don't influence the brain, that what's in the blood of the brain isn't communicating with what's going on in the brain. So don't think that they're exactly going to be the same thing, I guess is just my point. So one thing I think that's important for us to know about our gut bacteria, and that is that it's so diverse. There's so many different kinds of microbes that live within us, and each person has a unique community, is unique kind of as our fingerprint, and it's all influenced by your mother, because you are seeded at birth. That's when you're inoculated by how many antibiotics you had as an infant and as a young child, and then as an adult. Where you lived. You live in the city. Was your mom sterilizing everything in the house? Were you allowed to go play out with the chickens and the dogs and that sort of thing? And all these things affect what our microbiome looks like. But we do know that not all bacteria are beneficial for us. And just like we kind of touched on with this population group who developed depression, they had high levels of a specific family of bacteria, and that proved to be pathogenic for them. That proved to be more disease-causing, symptom-producing for them. So this idea of a community of microbes being balanced is really important. So a healthy community of microbes, from what we know, is one where there's diversity. So we've got a lot of them, but where the bad guys are kind of they're less, and they're controlled by the good guys. Kind of like any community, right? You go down to Portland now, and you're like, what happened here? The dynamics change. Now it seems like there's more, and I don't want to say this. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but there's more bad guys than good guys. Right? And because of that, we are seeing massive changes within a community and how safe we feel in that community and whether that community is clean and that sort of thing, right? That can take place in our gut. And if the bad guys are allowed to flourish in our gut and overpopulate, then we can start seeing the same kind of things going on in terms of their manifestation in our health. But the fascinating thing about these bacteria is that even though they're contained within our gut, they kind of live off the byproducts of what we eat. They love fiber. The good guys love the fiber. Bad guys tend to love more of the unhealthy foods that are in our diet. But they give off byproducts. So we call them metabolites. They give off these byproducts, and these byproducts don't remain just in my gut. They can actually travel through our system. What's even more interesting, though, because we tend to think of things all in terms of a literal molecule that's being absorbed and being transported and then affecting some distant organ, that type of thing. But it becomes a little bit more complicated than that, because we learn that the bacteria have their own way of communicating through the nervous system, and that they can do their little microbe talk, and somehow it's heard in distant areas, even in the brain. So the brain is registering what's going on in the gut. And this vagus nerve that we talked about, and I'll show you a picture later on, but it's like this nerve bundle from the brain, all innervating, these organs and my digestive tract. We always think of the brain as being the one in charge and, sending out the signals and directing, telling everyone else what to do. But 90% of the communication that's going on in this vagus nerve is actually going up. Hey, it's telling the brain, this is what's going on, and this is what you need to respond to, and that sort of thing. So kind of really fascinating. And the way that it communicates, so we just looked at the fact that, yes, the central nervous system, so the communication from our gut goes through the central nervous system. It can also communicate to the brain, though, through hormones, through the endocrine system, and also through my immune system. So the majority of my immune system is actually stationed at my gut, because that's where my body interfaces with more things from the environment than anywhere else. It's just kind of bombarded there. So my immune system is stationed, it's ready to protect me, and it gets trained there, what's friend, what's foe, a lot of stuff going on in the gut. But my immune system is also just on the other side, on the other side of the wall of my gut lining, and it can hear all the that's going on from my gut. So the immune system's like, I can hear that. We better respond to that. This is what's going down. And so it can ignite the immune system as well. How well can you see that? So this slide is really busy, and we're definitely not trying to explain all that, but just to kind of give another dimension of this communication, is that on the left side, you're seeing more of the healthy individual that has a healthy gut lining. And at the very bottom, those are 3 gut cells that are, because the lining of your intestines is made up of many different building, like brick and mortar cells, right? They're all closely joined together with tight junctions between them. And anything that's allowed into your body has to be going through the cell, has to be seen by the cell. It absorbs just what the body needs and then can, allow it entrance, kind of like a well-functioning TSA. We don't want that. You can come in, dump your water, this kind of stuff. So, but what can happen is if the TSA gets sloppy, we can say that, we have what we call leaky gut. And that's on the left-hand side, that right-hand side. On the right-hand side, we see these cells no longer tightly joined together. Now they're a little spaced apart. Those tight junctions are no longer tight. Now we have this leaky gut concept as a result of inflammation. And so there's stuff going through. There's stuff passing through TSA. You weren't supposed to bring that knife through, but in it went. You weren't supposed to bring that gun through, but kind of bypassed, so this is what's kind of going on then in the body as things start being allowed in the individual. And it's interesting because if you see, this is healthy and this is depressed. So this depressed individual could be depressed not only from life events, they're hard. There's multiple reasons for depression, but health could definitely be one of them. And this healthy gut, especially, that this leaky gut barrier could be allowing substances into the body that my immune system reacts to by producing these inflammatory cytokines, which can affect my neural circuits, and up it goes, and pretty soon I'm experiencing depression. but it might have been contributed to from my gut. Does that make sense? James, what time is it again? I'm sorry. 10:17, good. I really was hoping, and I want to allow maybe for 10 minutes of just discussion and interaction. So if you guys are listening to this stuff and you're like, I have a thought about that, would you write it down and save it for the end? Or I have a question about that. Would you write it down? Because I think it would be fun, especially since we're a small group, to actually have interaction on this topic. I'm not the one who knows it all, that's for sure, and I'd love to hear from you. So here in this slide, it's kind of the same thing that I was talking about. Healthy status, stress disease status. There we see a really healthy gut lining. And then on the other one, we see this no longer tightly junctioned together. There's inflammation going on. I think it's interesting here that we see this word dysbiosis. And that word dysbiosis underlies the leaky gut, stress disease, gut lining. And dysbiosis is simply a big word that means it's not a healthy community. Think of Portland and one of those communities that's no longer healthy, or downtown Seattle or something like that, where things just kind of went off, right? And because it went off, it's just not as healthy an environment, not as safe to go into. And because of that microbial community going off, we can see the manifestation of that in this leaky gut, allowing entrance to things that we normally wouldn't be allowing entrance into our body, and resulting in different symptoms. Research has shown that patients with severe mental health conditions often have very different microbes in their guts than people who do not have the conditions. This was a study conducted with adults over 65 years of age, found that dietary patterns predicted depression over time, unrelated to socioeconomic status or other health behaviors. So man's strongest impulse, your strongest impulse, urges you to seek your own happiness. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, we want our own happiness. And the Bible recognizes this desire and shows us that all heaven will unite with man in his efforts to gain true happiness. Do you believe that? If we believed that, it would be the best thing on the planet to be a Christian. We would be the happiest people in the world, and everyone along the streets would be like, what do you got, right? What is it? Give me some. Where'd you buy it? That would be phenomenal, wouldn't it? So, what's your why? Balanced mind. This one I think is so important. Don't want to necessarily have to read all these statements, but I think they're so beautiful. It is true that one of the strongest temptations that man has to meet is upon the point of appetite. Between the mind and the body, there's a mysterious and wonderful relation. They react upon each other. To keep the body in a healthy condition, to develop its strength, that every part of the living machinery may act harmoniously should be the first study of our life. To neglect the body is to neglect the mind. You want a healthy mind, you want a strong mind, then this is for you. I remember my dad is a physician, but he is long since, he's in his 90s. But when I was just learning this stuff, so I was like 19, 20, and I started telling him about, trying to introduce him to the concept of nutrition and it affecting our mind. And I just remembered that this morning, and I told James, he scoffed at me. He was like, that is the most ridiculous thing. There's no way, that doesn't exist. And my dad was very demonstrative when he disdained something. And that was just such a foreign concept to him, right? Now this was a good, 40 years ago, 30 whatever years ago. But now it's more accepted, isn't it? We just all are like, yes, what we put into our body affects our mind. And to think that what we eat doesn't affect our mind is really naive. I mean, think of everything that goes into our, all of our senses, whether it's the things that we smell. We know that smell affects our memory, right? Wow, if you smell something, it'll trigger something in your brain. Remember that smell, and it was associated with this. Those things that we put into our houses and our cars that make them smell good, all those plug-ins, the chemicals, the fuse, and those smells affect our brain because those chemicals are actually endocrine disruptors. They're not good for us. They're toxins, and we found that they can actually impair good mental function. So when we touch, I remember reading where if you touch a dog on his belly, he gets this surge of oxytocin, right? That bonding hormone. It's affecting his brain. You do that to my back and you're going to do this, get the same result. You know, my oxytocin's probably going to hit the roof. Thank you so much. Hearing. I wish I could find this fact. I need to do some more digging. Maybe you guys have heard it, where the vibration of bees, like beekeepers who are around bee vibrations, it causes longevity, it causes them to live longer, does something to the telomeres on their DNA. And I was like, really? That is so fascinating. This information coming in from my sense of hearing affecting my brain. Sight, early morning light, again, so powerful at affecting our brain and how the hormones that we produce in our brain, it really sets our master clock in our brain. It affects my cortisol production and my melatonin production 16 hours later. It's all, imprinting or changing the dynamics of what's going on in my brain. Exercise produces a substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which is like a brain fertilizer, like Miracle Grow on your brain neurons, like exercise does that. So why wouldn't we think that food, right, had a powerful influence on our brain as well? So this is another definition of health. Health is when all the integrated parts work harmoniously, each one giving honor to the other. We find that definition in 1 Corinthians 12, but it's also found within functional medicine, which is, as he mentioned, something that I've studied. That while in medicine we tend to segregate and specialize. You have a problem with your heart, you're going to go see a cardiologist. You're going to have a problem with your knee, you're going to see a rheumatologist. You know what I'm saying? You see some stomach, you have a gastroenterologist. So while we segregate, the body doesn't see itself that way. It's one integrated whole, and it is all intimately interconnected. And this concept of working harmoniously together is such a beautiful picture of health. Each part doing what it's supposed to do in reference to the other, under subjection to the head, which is Christ. That's 1 Corinthians 12, just this great definition of health. But when we look at the head, at our head, we realize, we have a brain there that hopefully is under subjection to the Spirit of God. But when we look at this brain, it too has been divided up into multiple parts. You don't see it visually, but we know, this part of the brain does this, and this part of the brain is responsible for this. And it has its delegated functions as well. And experience mental health, I think, is when we have a balanced mind. When all of those functions are given due expression, and when they're under the governance of the parts of the brain that are supposed to have that position of being in charge, reason, conscience, you know what I'm talking about more. And I think that this is something that we would do well to kind of pursue in our own lives. And I was contemplating this thought about our weak points and who's running the show in our brain and that sort of thing. Because remember, pleasure, the crave, is a part of our mental function within us. It's that desire for pleasure or pursual of pleasure. That's not a bad thing. God designed us that way, right? But it's where is it? Is it the top dog telling everyone else what it's going to do, or is it in subjection to reason and that sort of thing? So a well-balanced mind being where all the parts are functioning harmoniously with each other, even within my skull. All the faculties should be cultivated. All the powers of the mind should be exercised. Perception, judgment, memory. I would include in there your sense of humor, your creativity, right? All of these things need to be consistently expressed and developed. And I think it would be well for us to kind of identify what are the weak points of my mental function or my character, and how can I nurture those so that I'm more of a balanced person. Should all have equal strength in order to have a well-balanced mind. In that case, you would be a whole man. Otherwise, you are in danger of being but part of a man. How many of us are part of a man, right? I want to experience this wholeness, and I think that is a powerful definition of what it means to be healthy. All minds are not naturally constituted alike. We have varied minds and strong points of character and great weaknesses upon some points. If those who possess them would strengthen the weak points in their character by cultivation and exercise. How many people love to exercise? Oh yes. I see a lot of people who do not like to, I have to try to twist their, how can I motivate these people to exercise? I just don't get it. You don't want to move, just, no. Exercise is so important though, right? And that's what we can do with some of these, and you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to do it, exactly like so-and-so does it. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about showing up, right? Picking up the dumbbell, putting your walking shoes on, putting one foot in front of the other, but we're talking about it in relation to strengthening the weak points of our mind, right? So if some of us, we have our strong points and we tend to hone in there. But guess what? That is not going to lend yourself to being healthy and well-balanced. So to somehow say, I am weak in this area and I need to find that way of truly balancing. Cultivation, I think of the garden. I think of what does it take to grow a healthy plant? It takes cultivation. James and I moved to a place where the soil was horrible, and we've had to spend a lot of time just with the soil, right? We're pleating the soil, and boy, when the soil when you put something in that kind of soil, then it grows. So we got to start cultivating some of these things and exploring them, as uncomfortable as it might be initially, or as a little bit of hard work. Keep the appetite under the control of reason, appetite under the control of enlightened conscious, appetite under the control of the Spirit of God. And so interesting. I didn't share it because I'm trying to zoom through my notes, but the study that I shared with you, in which they were identifying these microbes in relation to depression, the lead author of that study was like, boy, the mind and the body are intimately connected. That was said in the 1800s, right? Intimately connected mind and body. So this becomes a very powerful motivator, right, for seeking health. We've looked at 3 so far, and we won't go through those because even though this one's pretty fascinating. Look at this one. This one shows the blood-brain barrier on the left and gut barrier on the right. And on the top part, you see these, again, the healthy, tightly junctioned cells that compose the lining of my gut. Strong gut lining, healthy, things are going well. Same thing with my blood-brain barrier. But we see that when the gut starts deteriorating, that the blood-brain barrier can start to deteriorate too. So all of a sudden now things are seeping into the blood, into the brain, that weren't previously allowed there before. And we wonder, why are we struggling so much? So this, and again, I'm not trying to say that this is the only reason for someone experiencing depression or anything like that, but it's an important one. And then the last one is the stronger spirit. And again, another very powerful motivator as to our why we would want to be healthy. Do I have like 5 minutes left? I'll bring my phone up here next. 10:30. How about we have 2 minutes if someone has a comment? Does anyone have a comment or a thought that they thought of in relation to this, or a question, or?
On the strong spirit and balanced mind, there's a study I read about that people who actually pray on a daily basis have more balanced mind and less depression in their family.
Yes. So she was just sharing how she read a study about how daily prayer, I will often ask my patients, about their spiritual life or their spiritual practice, because it is a power and a healing agent like no other, right? So yeah, thank you. Yes?
I was thinking when you were explaining about the relationship between diet and depression, is a classic Satan move is a downward spiral of the big lie. Is then the more you're depressed, the more you want comfort food.
Yes, exactly. And we get stuck in this vicious cycle. Where can we break that? But that's exactly right.
Now, years ago, I learned about not drinking milk was a good dietary thing to try. So I didn't drink milk for about 6 months. And then I learned about probiotics for my gut. So I started drinking probiotics. And mostly they had lactobacillus in there. And next thing you know, I'm just craving milk like crazy. So my gut totally verifies the gut-brain connection. And my cravings are coming from this bacteria that I just added to my gut. of something that it's not, that it really likes.
It's such an interesting experience that is. I've never heard that before, but there is research substantiating where they were identifying our cravings as being driven by the microbiome, by the community of bacteria. And when it comes to probiotics, a lot of times we're aware enough where we're like, yeah, I want a healthier gut, right? Oh, probiotics are good for my gut. I'm a probiotic, you're swallowing bacteria. But there's so many out there. How do you know which one's the one for you, right? So we just kind of blindly say, oh, this one's got this many billion and it says it's alive and okay, I'm going to try it, right? And sometimes we stumble on something that's really beneficial. Sometimes people are like, man, that made it worse, right? And so what's going on? And that's where we just have to be aware of, well, just like you and I bring something different to the table, right? We need each other. We all bring something different to the table. Same thing in the microbial world. It's God's signature in nature. There's so much diversity and each one provides something unique. And probiotics are kind of in their infancy in terms of us understanding their benefit. And thankfully there's been some research done, or there's ongoing research being done. Oh, this specific strain of Bifidobacteria longrosus 9647. I made that up. That specific bacteria has been studied for this specific ailment. Maybe it was IBS diarrhea, or maybe it was type 2 diabetes, or whatever. And in this population group, 70% of them experienced improvement in these symptoms. Oh, let's try Bifidobacteria longrosus 697. Let's try that one for you because you have the same symptoms, right? That's kind of where we're at with some of them. And I think that that's a better approach than kind of stabbing in the dark sometimes. But it's interesting that you were like, wait, there's a connection here. I better stop the probiotic, right? Switch the probiotic. Yeah, good. To try something different. Good. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Let's just close with prayer. Father in heaven, we're just so grateful that we are fearfully and wonderfully made and that you gave us this amazing body, and we want to understand how you made us, Father, so that we could live optimally under your governance, and we want to do it by faith. Please show us how. In Jesus' name, amen.